Hi, Rachel. Thank you so much for being on the Performance Podcast today. I'm very excited to have you. You've done a lot of research behind. You also are in the dancing world. So you are Dr. Jefferson Buchanan. Tell us like a bit about your background, your research, the sports you're in, and where are you today?
Oh, for sure. Thank you for having me. Well, I've been involved in teaching for a very long time, 35 years this year. So lots of experience in 3 different countries. My original training was in physical education and health with a specialism in dance. And I also have a second subject of special educational needs. So I very much come at things from an inclusive perspective. I'm quite fascinated by the body in movement, in health, different forums. And so I guess that's, I started working with children, as in secondary children, moved down and worked with little ones for a long time. And now I've moved up and up and up, and I work with adults, and I help them to learn how to teach the creative arts and anything to do with the body moving in teacher education out here in Australia. But I was for a long time head of physical education and performing arts in the International School of Geneva as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And you've done some research, and there was recently an article that came out about some of the things that you were saying around the BMI, body mass index, shouldn't be the reference to which we measure ourselves against. So can you tell us more about what happened behind that article and what we should know about the BMI?
Yes, of course. This is kind of like a real personal interest of mine, not because I've had any issues myself with doctors, but because I've spoken with quite a lot of women on an informal level, on an anecdotal level, in terms of the kind of Western medical education support or lack of support that they have in relation to health, particularly from this more holistic and inclusive perspective. And one of my very good friends said to me that BMI can be weaponized sometimes against women, and that it's a tool. We had lots of conversations about this, and it's a tool that is very traditional, and we were questioning it. And so I kind of delved a bit further, and being a person who's quite fascinated by the body and everything that the body can do, particularly in terms of movement, and having a sociology background as well, I began to sort of dig a bit deeper, and I discovered, and this has been known for quite some time, but I like to kind of bring things back up. And it's been known that the BMI was a tool that was devised by this mathematician initially, a Belgian mathematician called Lambert Adolphe Jacques Quetelet, and he devised this body mass index as a tool in 1832. So it's got a very long tradition. And as such, as a sociologist, I always think, okay, well, why has this lasted so long, particularly when it wasn't founded by a scientist or a person with even a health background? Yeah. Let me dig a little bit more deeply. And I began to sort of look at some of the articles out there online, and I thought, okay, so basically what we're saying is that this tool is still relevant to today. And yet it is a tool that was originally designed a long time ago, but it was also designed for a particular sector of the population. And that concerned me. So I explored that a bit further.
Amazing. And so just to like the BMI, my understanding is, for instance, in kilos and meters, it would be my weight divided by the square of my height. So if I'm 64 kilograms and a meter 70, it's 64 divided by 170 times 170. So for me, it would be 22.
Yeah, exactly.
And I love what you say, that it was created by a mathematician and not a scientist, and not revised in nearly 200 years, right?
No, exactly. They didn't even they reconstructed it in 1972. So they kind of renamed it. It used to be called the Quetelet Index. And so that's quite fascinating. I think, wow, so it was just picked up and sort of plonked into this new format and given a new name in 1972. And yeah, it's enormously problematic, because from having talked with women informally, what I've found out is that, there is this over reliance on BMI, and that it is equated with a person's health. And it basically, well, it ignores much of what makes us healthy. And it focuses very much in this very myopic, narrow way on mass as an indicator of health.
And so my understanding is that because it's only like a general number, it doesn't take into account if I have more muscles or anything that is probably more equal to being healthy. So can you tell us more about what should we be looking at? First of all, what are the issues that you've seen relying on the BMI? You were saying there is like some issues for women in particular around this number.
Yes, there are. I mean, there's various issues. I guess the first issue is that the original construction of the Quetelet Index was based on Western European males of a particular age, and consequently, it's what I'd say. It denies diversity. It therefore leads to misclassification of certain people. For example, women generally, unless they work out a lot, have less muscle mass than men, and that's a natural phenomenon. Obviously, there are differences in terms of individuals. There are also issues with menopausal women, when we know that the hormones shift, and that there is a lot of the latest research is talking about this kind of shift in terms of becoming more estrogenic. We can carry more fat, particularly around the belly, and the body is kind of making up for the deficit of estrogen that we have when we become postmenopausal. And so that's kind of like a phenomenon that they've been researching a lot recently. So this accumulation of visceral fat or belly fat is something that's quite interesting. But there's not enough research that's been done on that. There's also issues in terms of if you're a woman who works out a lot, or even a male who works out a lot, your muscle mass is going to be a lot more than someone who is just your regular, doing regular walking or not, or perhaps leading a sedentary life. And a fun fact is that the athlete Usain Bolt, he was almost classified as almost overweight with the BMI when he was at the absolute pinnacle of his fitness. And so there's an example of how someone who is a super fit, super healthy athlete, male, with a very heavy muscle mass, is being misclassified. Then there's also problems with elderly people as well. So when you delve into some of that research around there, we know that muscle mass decreases and shifts around the body as we age. And so essentially by doing this particular calculation, it's not allowing for, age changes, menopausal muscle mass, even bone density. And there's some research out there in terms of ethnicity as well. So because it was based on a study of Western European men, that certain ethnic groups have heavier bones and so on. But it's in general, it's just not a reliable tool. And the worst thing we could possibly do would be to use it to start stigmatizing children in school, which goes on. And they are put into these classifications of BMI, which can lead to all sorts of body shaming at a very young age.
Fascinating. And so what should we be looking at to understand, am I fit, am I healthy? So at my company, Wild AI, we promote being fit and healthy. Definitely not skinny, but also not overweight. And we find that for certain people, it's hard for us to understand, like, what should I be looking at? Is it my calories intake? Is it my BMI? Or what can is it my resting heart rate? What is a healthy resting heart rate for me, 64 kilos? So like, what are these numbers that we can look at? And is there something that is general, or is it very dependent, case by case basis?
I think we focus too heavily on generic norms of what it is to be healthy. And we do need to take into account all of these different variables. For example, something that suited me when I was in my 20s doesn't suit me now in my 50s. I'm a postmenopausal woman. And basically, I know that I need to be in bed before midnight. It's like, it's for me, it's just the next day I've got huge brain fog and I'm struggling. So things like sleep hygiene, which in other words, we mean good sleep habits, for example, be consistent, go to bed at the same time each night, get up at the same time each morning, even on the weekends, try not to sleep in. That can make you, a little bit struggling with concentration, focus, even higher levels of anxiety can result. Depression has been linked to sleep problems in women, particularly as well. Make sure your bedroom is quiet, that it's dark, it's relaxing, there's a sort of comfortable temperature and so on, and avoid any screens about an hour before bedtime. We're not supposed to be on any kind of screen, but there are other factors that we can obviously think about, which is taking regular physical exercise. And again, that is not the same for people in different age groups, So I know when I was in my 20s, I was a crazy long distance runner. And I was running, 50, 70, 80, sometimes kilometers a week. I can't do that now. So instead of doing that now, I cross train, I do biking, I do running, I do walking, I dance, I do fun activities that are very physical. I skip, jump rope, and things like that. So I vary it a lot more because that enables my body post menopause to be able to manage the physical demands and the exertion that I feel in my body as I age. I do a lot more yoga and stretching. And I listen to my body. So, if I've done a 5K run and I'm tired the next morning, then I won't get up and do another 5K run because it's just my body's saying to me, hang on a minute, you did quite a lot yesterday. Perhaps you could just do some dancing today or go for a walk instead. A power walk, it's still kind of very cardio. So there are those kinds of basics in terms of sleep, in terms of physical activity, obviously in terms of nutrition, because we know that the gut-brain axis now, it's very well known in the research that mental health problems are not just in the head. It's very much about looking at the whole body and what we're putting into our bodies and what kinds of physical activity we're doing or not. So being aware of the types of food that we eat, reducing, not cutting out, not being super, super strict unless we're top athletes, but being kind to our bodies, limiting processed food, limiting sugary snacks, thinking very carefully about saturated and trans fats, and just being very mindful. I mean, mindful eating is, not eating with a screen, a TV or a phone, and making sure that we taste our food, we smell our food, and we don't eat more than, we don't get over full. So we stop at about 80%. And we actually sort of understand that our body, it takes 20 minutes or so for the food to hit the stomach. So those kinds of basics are really important in terms of health, but also connecting with others, regular social connection, taking time for self, but also thinking about, have you got a good social network where you can, lean on people when you're struggling and so on.
So these are some healthy behaviors that we can adopt to increase our fitness, or daily fitness, and probably also impact our longevity. And
yes,
which I can relate to. Definitely for me, going to bed before midnight just changes my day after. I don't know, my sleep before midnight is better. Hydration as well, drinking water, and and I think what I take from what you were saying is also tuning in our bodies, trying to understand ourselves. Do I feel fit and healthy? Because I think it varies over time, and definitely
Definitely.
one person is different than for another person. But if we are energetic and feel good, and our brain functions well, and we are positive, I guess that's probably a very good indicator to say that we are fit, as opposed to having zero fat on the body. And
Yeah.
and is there any, like, any number, anything that we can look at to see, okay, I am, like, this is correct for me. So for instance, I really like looking at my resting heart rate. I use Oura Ring, and I know that unless I drink alcohol, I'm never over 60. And if I'm really fit, I'm on the 50, but typically I'm more in the 50s. And I'm wondering, like, what is healthy for me? What is a good baseline? Is that an interesting indicator? Or, like, for instance, waist circumference, as for instance, belly fat might be like not optimal as we age, but as you said, like, as women anyways, when we hit perimenopause and menopause, we naturally have more fat, and anyways, as women we have fats, which is a great thing because we endure it. So what is normal, what is good? Is there something we can look at ourselves and think, okay, that's great, that's a very nice proportion?
Yeah, I think there are, but again, I think it is very much individually based,
Yeah.
and I think in terms of heart rate, for example, anything between usually about 60 to 80 beats per minute is normal at the average resting rate, but we do find that some people have very low heartbeats per minute for all kinds of reasons. That could be a DNA reason. It could be that they train a lot. They might do a lot of meditation, for example, that is known to have a long-term effect on the resting rate. So there's all sorts of influence, but that's about average. And again, it depends. But when we're working out, if you feel as though your body is very stressed and that your heart rate has gone up and it's really, making you feel very, very stressed, then you know that you're overstressing the body. So it is about definitely tuning in to that. So there's all sorts of charts that you can find online, sort of for the average resting rate, the average working rate, 65 to 80% ish of your maximum heart rate. There's all sorts of charts that you can find online, but I don't find those particularly useful for self. I tend to, I always wear my Fitbit, and I tend to just sort of check it through the day. And sometimes heart rate, of course, can go up during the day for all sorts of reasons. And it might not just be because of physical activity. It could be because of stress. And so we know that chronic stress, when you're having regular stress every single day and you're in a very, very stressful job, that will have all sorts of long-term effects on our health and our weight management. So we know that, chronic stress actually often leads to fluctuations in weight. So that could be that, that you go underweight or that you become overweight, because any kind of stress on a long-term basis affects our hormone levels. And our hormone levels in turn affect our body's capabilities in terms of managing our general systems, our endocrine system, our lymphatic system, but also our weight. And, we have the saying, rest and digest. And that's, a lovely one in the sense that when you eat and then you rest, you're able to digest your food much better. And so it goes to the right places in your body. And that's, that's all part of our parasympathetic system, which is enabled when we are in non-fight or flight systems when we're eating. But if you're eating and you're stressed and you're running out the door and you're trying to bolt down a bowl of cornflakes and you're trying to get your kids off to school, and the stuff that we do to our bodies, which we all do, that stress, that food is not going to do you any good. So yeah, find the time, find the place, even if it's 10 minutes, just to enjoy and slow down that meal and make sure that it, the nutrients get to the right place.
So what do you think of the morning or day habit of having a huge coffee with a lot of milk and like on the go and chucking it.
Well, there's new research out there with coffee that actually, it actually says that coffee is quite good for us. So there's also, I love this about being in the research space, is that, it's definite that coffee is bad for us and we should all cut it out. But actually, the newest research doesn't say that. So this is what I mean about being a researcher in health is so fascinating, because things do fluctuate, things do change. And coffee is, it's from coffee bean. It's very, very good for us, but not overdose, like 3-4 coffees a day is okay. They used to say that wasn't okay, but then years ago they said that you shouldn't have eggs every day, that it would raise your cholesterol. And that was a load of nonsense, because now there's loads of new research that says we can eat eggs whenever we like. So it's hard to keep up, but I think we need to have this sense of just kind of, as I say, coming back to self. If you know that you've had 2 eggs yesterday and you don't feel like having another egg today, don't do it. And it's all about moderation. I brought my own daughters up who are now in their 20s. And I always said, for lunch, you can have your muffin or your ice cream or your whatever. And then after dinner, you've got to have the yogurt and the fruit. Your choice. You decide when you eat what. But you're not going to have muffins and cakes and for 2 meals in your day. I can't do anything about that now. They've left home. But when they lived with me, I was able to begin to guide them on a nutrition level and not cut out something, but actually just learn moderation, because we know now some of the latest neurological research. The moment that you try to cut something out, our body goes, oh no, that's not going to happen. And we want it more. So if you cut out chocolate, if you cut out cakes and sweets, it's like you get this craving for it, So in the end, just have a little bit of what you fancy. That's what I say.
It's so funny. I have a baby, and like if I take one thing away from her hand, like I take an electric plug, I'm like, no. She's like, it's the only thing she wants. So
perfect example.
It's like none of the rest is interesting. So completely understand. And on the article that was on LinkedIn, there were these suggestions. So the question was, so what should we be looking at if BMI isn't a right index? For instance, waist circumference, waist to hip ratio. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's been quite a lot of research suggesting, not mine, but others, suggesting alternatives to the body mass index, but also possibly not even alternatives, but having them as a complementary evaluation tool that goes with the BMI. So I believe that this article, it's done really well. It's just sort of raised a lot of interest. And I think that part of that is because it empowers the reader to actually begin to say, hang on a minute, I am not my weight. I am not this number. It's not, we're not reducing women, particularly because I'm very much into gendered health research. We're not reducing women to a number and then saying you're unhealthy. We're not doing that. What we are saying, and what I was saying in my article, is that there are alternatives. So, for example, we know that belly fat, as I mentioned before, the visceral fat, when it's around our vital organs, that carries the most health risk. So some researchers have looked into waist circumference, and that's a measure of fat distribution in the body, particularly relevant for athletes, as I mentioned earlier, with Usain Bolt. When you carry more muscle, waist circumference is a good indicator of a predictor of health. And there are sort of numbers out there, but again, we need to be quite careful with those. So around about 94 centimeters for men and around about 80 centimeters for women is supposed to be an indicator of what they call optimal health. And, that it's difficult to measure. There are videos, and I put a link to one of those in the article where you can go into YouTube. I often use YouTube, get a good one that's got at least 20,000 likes as opposed to one of the less interesting ones. And you can just do yourself a waist circumference measurement. There's also the waist to hip ratio. And that calculates, again, it's the proportion of your body fat, but it's how much is actually stored on your waist and also your hips and also your buttocks. And so that's the World Health Organization suggests that should be about 0.85 or less for women and a little bit more in men, so about 0.9, in order to reduce health risks. But as I say, it's just one measure of health. And the researchers have suggested that those could be combined with additional health tool measurements. So that one's particularly good for older people because, as I mentioned before, in older people, the body proportions on which BMI is founded, they actually move about. And so we need to be extremely careful when we're measuring the weight and the muscle mass of elderly people. There's waist to height ratio, and that's just about height being divided by waist circumference. And then we've got, it's a bit yucky, but skin fold measurement tests as well. The calipers that come in and grab on specific location. I mean, it makes me go, shudder when I
Oh, really?
when I think of someone doing that. But, we do have these tests in physical education. So they're pretty horrible. And lots of people would go, oh, yikes, I'm not going to do that. But you can actually measure with these skin calipers specific areas of the body that actually have fat on them. And that's quite interesting from a physiological basis. So you can do the abdomen, you can do the triceps or the quadriceps, and you can do them with these skin calipers. But apart from that, what we mentioned before, checking your heart rate, doing that regularly, but also when and if you go to your doctor to just have some kind of health check, to actually make sure that they have more of an inclusive approach like this, that they're not just throwing a number at you and saying, you've got to watch out, you're actually overweight in the overweight category now, or the obese category, or the morbidly obese category. It's actually about us making sure that they have this more inclusive approach, and that they look at lifestyle, they look at diet, they look at your physical activity, your regular, what you do in the average week, but they also look at your family medical history too.
Yeah, amazing. So what I take from that is having numbers is maybe interesting, but really the more core is going back to ourselves and to understand how does it work for us. And all these ratios make a lot of sense, because if I am way shorter than my sister, obviously I wouldn't have the same weight, or I wouldn't have the same. So having ratios make more sense than pure numbers. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's okay. And just one final thing, there's all sorts of interesting research. Do you know the expression TOFI?
No.
TOFI, that's a good one. It means thin on the outside and fat on the inside. And I just think I didn't mention it in my article, but I just thought it was too long, the article, so I had to chop a lot. But I think that's a really interesting one. Thin on the outside, fat on the inside. So slim people, thin people, everyone's like always saying, oh, you look great, you did it. But actually, who knows what's going on the inside? So we can have all sorts of hidden layers of fat stored up around these vital organs because of the way that we eat. And yet we naturally have this sort of thin DNA. And so that's something else to think about. And so basically, we have to worry about that far more than someone who outwardly is a bit bigger, because fat cells around those bodies actually changes all sorts of our chemical balance, our hormones, our mood, our fertility levels, all sorts of things. So we need to be very careful about the toffees in the world.
Okay. Love that. Thank you so much, Dr. Rachel Jefferson Buchanan. I'll put the links to the article and your research. And thank you for being here. Really interesting. I think it's going to be fascinating for many of us.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you for having me.
What is the future of performance? My name is Hélène Guillaume. I'm the founder and CEO of WellDI, the performance platform for women, and your host for the Performance Podcast. I'm an athlete, a data scientist, studied mathematics, and I was a quant in a hedge fund. Through my career, I met incredible humans pushing the boundaries of what performance means, physically, mentally, I'm obsessed with the idea of the ultra-human. If you understand yourself deeply, what happens inside, if you understand the rules, how you function, you can go beyond. I liked experiencing and playing with my own body on that. Running 100k ultramarathons, swimming in ice at 5:30 a.m. Just find it really fun to play on the edge testing. Because if you know the rules, you can go wild. And that's where our company names come from. Wild AI. With data, analytics, ultra personalization, we take you in a journey to understand the basics of your own body as a woman. How it works, why do I feel the symptoms? Is there a pattern? Can I track it, see correlations? Approaching our bodies like time series patterns. Yes, having been a quant in a hedge fund has formatted my brain. I'm in this journey of exploring what it means for myself, and we are so many in this research journey. And this show is me exploring the next frontier. What is performance? What do humans do around biohacking, tracking, life hacks, health optimization? So, what can you expect to learn? I'm going to be interviewing people that are shaping these new worlds. Athletes, doctors, entrepreneurs, building groundbreaking technologies, biohackers testing on themselves, really shaping the future of performance. It can be hard to navigate this yourself, so let me be your guide. See you in the next episode.